Today, the title of my message is The Upside Down Kingdom. We're going to look at 7 different teachings of Jesus, or statements of Jesus in Matthew's Gospel. Just from Matthew 16 through Matthew 23, we're going to look at 7 different statements of Jesus that communicate a recurring theme throughout the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to start with Matthew chapter 16, 24 and 25. Jesus speaking says this: "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it." Another translation: if you try to save your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. That's upside down. Matthew 18, 1 through 4, a couple chapters later, we read this: about that time the disciples came to Jesus and asked this question: "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Jesus called a little child to him and put the child among them. Then he said, "I tell you the truth. So anyone who becomes as humble as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." That was upside down theology. In our culture today, we are a people that are very concerned with and very enamored with social status, are we not? We are very concerned with it. We are enamored with social status. In fact, a lot of the behavior which we attribute to greed, people wanting to get stuff for themselves, it's really not about greed at all. It really is about a hunger for status. So that desire to buy that fine luxury car, it's partly about the way the car performs for us, but it is mostly for what the car proclaims about us, right? It's about, what does everybody think of me when they see me driving in this car? In fact, I would say that in the culture in Jesus' day, the concern about social status was even greater than it is for us today. The problem is that children occupied, if not the lowest, one of the lower rungs on the social ladder. They were low on the social hierarchy. And so Jesus is saying to them, you want to be great? Become like a child. And their thoughts are, no. Children, listen, children are dependent. Children are powerless. In their minds and their understanding of greatness, they associated greatness with power and independence, self-sufficiency. But Jesus' kingdom is an upside-down kingdom, and Jesus says self-sufficiency is not greatness, independence is not greatness, power is not greatness. But being like a child, humbling yourself, recognizing that you are not self-sufficient, God is your sufficiency, you are not independent, you are completely and wholly dependent on God, that's great. Matthew 19, verse 30, Jesus says this, he says, "But many who are first will be last, and the last first." It's upside down. It's at the conclusion of Jesus' encounter with the rich young ruler. Jesus says, "Sell all your possessions, give it to the poor, come follow me, and you'll have life." He can't do it because he doesn't understand God's upside-down kingdom. Here's the thing about surrendering. The failure to surrender everything to Jesus results in us surrendering everything that matters, everything he really needs. Matthew chapter 21, verse 31, we read these words. "Then Jesus explained his meaning. I tell you the truth, corrupt tax collectors and prostitutes will get into the kingdom of God before you do." Who is he speaking to? He was speaking to the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the scribes. And he's saying, the scandalous sinners that you have contempt for, that you perceive as being far, far away, maybe completely unworthy of ever getting into the kingdom, he says they're getting into the kingdom before you. And when we really look closely at what Jesus is saying, is that they're getting into the kingdom, you're not. These scandalous sinners, the ones that everybody saw in their rebellion, and they did rebel. You know, Jesus is not making light of their sin, of the tax collectors and the prostitutes. The point is that what the Pharisees didn't recognize is that while they had been rebels against God, now they had been coming to Jesus Christ. They had humbled themselves and were repenting of their sin and embracing Jesus as their Messiah, as their Savior. So at the end of the day, what Jesus is saying to them is, you Pharisees and you religious leaders, says, you put yourself in the front of the line, right? Because that's what they did. They thought of themselves, We're on the front line. As soon as the kingdom opens up, we'll be the first ones in. And here's what Jesus is saying. You try to put yourself at the front of the line, but you're really the ones that are not even on the right line. In Matthew 23, verse 12, we read these words from Jesus. He says, "But those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." This is the last stage that we're looking at today. But this last one sums up all the others, and it expresses the one grand truth about the kingdom of God. It's for those who are humble to receive it. It's not for the self-righteous, self-satisfied, self-sufficient, self-promoters of the world. That's not the way into God's kingdom, and it's not what characterizes God's kingdom people. None of those things characterize God's kingdom people. God's kingdom people are people who've embraced the virtue of humility. True humility doesn't mean you demean yourself. It doesn't mean you debase yourself. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking less about yourself. Or maybe I'll put it this way, it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking about yourself less. The beauty of true humility is a blessing, because what it does is it leads to becoming so captivated by God that we are no longer preoccupied with self. True humility does not kill ambition, it only kills selfish ambition. God's kingdom people live their lives as humble servants, meaning that our life is oriented towards not making money for ourselves and making a name for ourselves, but making a difference for the glory of God and the good of others. A humble servant who is in the business world will be driven by a passion. Again, it doesn't mean that they're passionless, they have no drive. No, they will be driven by a passion to produce a great product or a great service so they can be a great blessing to people in need, rather than people who are driven by a passion and an ambition to crush the competition so they can get the adulation of people. Jesus' kingdom is an upside-down kingdom because he's bringing his kingdom into a world that's already upside down. And when you take something that's upside down and you turn it upside down, you actually turn it right side up. And so at the end of the age, when Jesus returns and we're all gathered around the throne, as it tells us in Revelation, we're going to hear this cry, "Now the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdom of our God." And that means that what was upside down has been turned upside down, so it is now right side up.